Jake Morrison stood at the observation deck of Defense Station Alpha, watching the mining ships return from their daily runs to the asteroid belt. The station orbited Kepler 442b, a world that had become humanity's most important mining operation outside of the Sol system. 50,000 people called this place home now, and Jake was responsible for keeping them safe. Captain Lisa Brooks walked up beside him, holding a steaming cup of coffee. She was his second in command, and had been with him since they first arrived here 3 years ago. The mining operation had grown beyond anyone's expectations, pulling rare metals from the asteroid field that Earth needed for its expansion into space. "Another good day," Lisa said, watching the cargo ships dock with their holds full of precious ore. "The families down on the planet are settling in well too." Jake nodded. The planet below had breathable air and decent weather. Many of the miners had brought their wives and children, turning what started as a simple extraction operation into a real colony. Schools, hospitals, and even parks had been built in the main settlement. Contact coming in from long-range sensors, called out Lieutenant Danny Williams from the communication station. "Big one too, sir." Jake and Lisa hurried to the command center. The main screen lit up with sensor data that made Jake's stomach drop. Ships were appearing at the edge of the system, but not just a few ships. Hundreds of them, representing all 3 major alien powers that controlled most of the galaxy. The Zephyrians came first, their elegant silver ships moving in perfect formation. They considered themselves the nobility of space, with their tall, graceful bodies and superior technology. Behind them came the Korvaxi fleet, dark red vessels bristling with weapons. The Korvaxi were warriors who respected only strength and had never lost a major battle. Last came the Nethran Collective, their bioships looking like living creatures rather than machines. The Nethran shared a hive mind that made them nearly impossible to surprise or outmaneuver. "Sir, they're requesting communication," Danny reported, his voice tight with worry. "Put them through," Jake ordered. The screen changed to show Admiral Veltar of the Zephyrian Navy. His pale blue skin and silver eyes gave him an otherworldly beauty, but his expression was cold as ice. Behind him, Jake could see representatives from the other 2 species. "Human colony Kepler, 442b, Veltar spoke in his musical voice. "I am Admiral Veltar, speaking for the Galactic Triumvirate. You will hear our words and obey them." Jake straightened. "This is Lieutenant Commander Morrison, commanding officer of this station. What do you want?" "Your species has spread too far from your home world," Veltar continued. "The Triumvirate has decided that humanity poses a biological and cultural threat to galactic stability. You have 30 standard days to abandon all colonies beyond your Sol system. All humans must return to Earth and accept permanent quarantine within your original star system." Lisa stepped forward. "Quarantine? For what reason?" A new voice answered, harsh and guttural. Commander Thak of the Korvaxi fleet appeared on screen. "Your species lacks proper submission instincts. You do not know your place in the natural order. This makes you dangerous to galactic peace." The third speaker was stranger still. The Nethran representative looked like a pale human woman, but her eyes held the coldness of the hive mind. "Individual analysis confirms genetic incompatibility with established civilization parameters. Human unpredictability factors exceed acceptable ranges for continued expansion permissions." Jake felt anger building in his chest, but he kept his voice steady. "And if we refuse?" "Then you will be removed by force," Veltar said simply. "Your colonies will be destroyed, your ships captured or eliminated, and survivors will be transported back to Earth under military escort. The quarantine will be enforced by permanent blockade." The communication ended, leaving the command center in stunned silence. Jake stared at the screen, processing what had just happened. The 3 most powerful species in the galaxy had united, for the first time in recorded history, and they had united against humanity. "Sir, incoming message from Earth Command," Danny called out. Jake nodded, expecting orders to evacuate or attempt negotiation. Instead, Admiral Patricia Davis appeared on screen, her weathered face showing the determination that had made her Earth's top military commander. All human colonies and vessels. This is Earth Command with Priority Alpha message. You have undoubtedly received the alien ultimatum demanding our retreat to Sol system. Earth's response is as follows. Humanity refuses to retreat. All colonies are to maintain position and prepare for extended operations. Reinforcement and supply missions are already underway. We do not abandon our people and we do not bow to threats. Earth Command out. The message ended, leaving another moment of silence before the command center erupted in conversation. Jake raised his hand for quiet. You heard the orders? He said. We're staying. Lisa, I need you to contact the planet's surface and explain the situation to the civilian population. Give them the choice to evacuate if they want. Most of them won't leave, Lisa said confidently. These people came here to build something. They won't give it up without a fight. Jake turned to the tactical station where Lieutenant Karen White was already running defensive calculations. Karen, what's our situation? Not good for a straight fight, sir, she admitted. We've got the station's defense grid and about 20 ships, mostly converted civilian vessels. They've got over 300 warships from 3 different fleets. Then, we don't fight straight, Jake said. He looked out at the asteroid field where human miners had been working for 3 years. We fight smart. Danny, get me a channel to all ships in the planet's surface. When the connection was established, Jake began speaking to his people. This is Commander Morrison. By now you all know the situation. 3 alien fleets have given us 30 days to abandon our homes and return to Earth as prisoners. Earth has told us to stay and fight. He paused, looking around at the faces of his crew. I won't lie to you. This is going to be the hardest fight humanity has ever faced. But I want you to remember something. Every single one of us came here because we refused to accept limits. We left Earth not because it was easy, but because it was necessary. We built homes on a world no one thought we could colonize. We pulled riches from space that others said were impossible to reach. Jake's voice grew stronger. These aliens think they know us. They think we're just another species that will fold when threatened. They have no idea what they're dealing with. They're about to learn that when you back humans into a corner, we don't curl up and die. We come out swinging. The crew was nodding now, fear replaced by determination. We have 30 days to prepare. I want every civilian ship armed, every asteroid in this field turned into a fortress, and every person on this planet ready to show these aliens what human stubbornness really looks like. Jake looked directly into the camera. They think they're giving us an ultimatum. They have no idea they just declared war on the one species that doesn't know how to quit. The 30 days passed faster than anyone wanted. Jake Morrison watched the countdown timer on his command screen reach 0, knowing that somewhere in space, the alien fleet was preparing to move. His people had worked around the clock to prepare their defenses, but everyone knew it would not be enough against 300 warships. Contact, Lieutenant Danny Williams called out from his station. The alien fleet is moving toward us. Jake nodded grimly. The time for preparation was over. Around him, the command center buzzed with quiet activity as his crew took their positions. Through the viewports, he could see the mining ships that had been converted into makeshift warships, their hulls bristling with weapons that had been mounted wherever space could be found. All ships report ready, sir, Captain Lisa Brooks said, from her position at the communications console. The planet's surface is prepared too. Colonel Ben Harris says his people are ready for whatever comes. The alien fleet approached in the same perfect formations they had arrived in 30 days ago. Jake could see on his sensors that they expected this to be simple work. The Zephyrian ships moved with elegant precision, while the Korvaxi vessels came in aggressive attack formation. The Nethran bioships seemed to flow through space like living things hunting prey. They're targeting the station first, Lieutenant Karen White reported from Tactical. Probably want to take out our command center and end this quickly. Jake keyed his communicator to broadcast to all human forces. All units, this is Morrison. They think we're going to fight like every other species they've faced. They expect us to try to preserve our ships and minimize casualties. They're about to learn they were wrong. The first Korvaxi destroyer broke from the main fleet, moving toward the mining station with weapons charging. Captain Tony Rodriguez, piloted his converted ore hauler, the New Texas, directly toward the much larger warship. Tony's ship was barely 1/10 the size of the destroyer, but it carried something the aliens had not expected. New Texas to command, Tony's voice crackled over the radio. Beginning ramming run, tell my wife I love her. Tony, negative, Jake shouted into his communicator. Pull back and engage at range. Sorry, sir, Tony replied, but they need to learn something about humans right now. The New Texas slammed into the Corvaxi destroyer's engine section at full speed. The collision tore both ships apart, but the destroyer's reactor went critical, taking out 2 nearby Zephyrian cruisers in the explosion. In one moment, Tony Rodriguez had destroyed 3 alien warships with a mining vessel, and a lot of courage. The alien fleet stopped advancing. Jake could imagine the confusion on their bridges as they tried to understand what had just happened. No rational species would sacrifice a ship and crew to take out an enemy vessel when other options existed. But humans had never been particularly rational when they were angry. Sir, multiple contacts breaking from the main fleet, Karen reported. Looks like they're going to hit us from several directions at once. Jake smiled grimly. Good. That means they're taking us seriously now. All ships, execute Plan Delta. The human ships scattered like startled fish, but not in retreat. Instead, they moved deeper into the asteroid field where they had been preparing for 30 days. The aliens followed, confident that their superior ships could handle anything the humans threw at them. They were wrong again. The first Zephyrian squadron to enter the asteroid field found themselves flying through what looked like empty space. Then the rocks around them exploded into light and fire. The humans had turned dozens of asteroids into hidden weapons platforms, each one packed with mining explosives and jury-rigged missile launchers. Admiral Veltar's beautiful flagship shuddered as mining charges detonated against its shields. The elegant Zephyrian had expected to face desperate humans shooting wildly. Instead, he found himself in a carefully planned kill zone where every piece of space debris might be a bomb. All ships, withdraw from the asteroid field, he ordered. But it was too late. More human ships appeared from hiding places among the rocks, attacking with modified mining lasers and improvised torpedoes made from mining charges. Captain Rick Thompson brought his ship, the converted freighter Liberty Bell, out from behind a large asteroid and opened fire on a Corvaxi cruiser. His weapons were nothing more than mining equipment, but mining equipment was designed to cut through solid rock. It worked just as well on alien armor. On the planet below, the aliens tried a different approach. Instead of sending ships into the dangerous asteroid field, they decided to bombard the human settlement from orbit. A squadron of Nethran bioships positioned themselves above the main colony and began charging their weapons. Colonel Ben Harris had been expecting this. All units execute Groundhog, he ordered. The planet's surface erupted as hidden missile sites opened fire. The humans had spent 30 days converting their mining equipment into surface-to-space weapons. Drilling rigs became missile launchers, ore processors became ammunition factories, and the entire colony became a fortress. The Nethran ships found themselves under attack from weapons they had not even detected. Worse, the humans were using their own hive mind communication against them. Dr. Helen Mitchell had spent weeks studying captured Nethran technology, and her team was now broadcasting random thoughts and emotions into the bioship's neural networks. The Nethran vessels began flying erratic patterns as their crews suffered from artificial confusion and fear. 2 ships collided with each other as their pilots lost control. A third ship simply stopped moving as its crew became overwhelmed by projected human emotions of rage and determination. Commander Thack of the Corvaxi watched his fleet take losses that should have been impossible. These humans were not fighting like civilized beings. They were fighting like wild animals backed into a corner, using every dirty trick and desperate tactic they could think of. Admiral Veltar, he growled over the communication channel. These humans are insane. They are willing to die just to damage us. I can see that, Veltar replied coldly. His flagship had taken more damage in the last hour than in his previous 50 years of service. They fight without regard for proper military doctrine. The Nethran representative's voice joined the conversation, but now it carried traces of individual emotion instead of cold hive mind logic. Human unpredictability factors have exceeded all projections. Current tactical situation shows unacceptable loss ratios. Jake Morrison heard fragments of the alien communications through his intelligence team's monitoring equipment. He smiled as he realized what was happening. The aliens had expected to face another civilized species that would fight by their rules. Instead, they were facing humans who had learned their military tactics by fighting each other for thousands of years. "All ships, this is Morrison," he broadcast. "They're starting to pull back. Now we show them what happens when they come into our home and threaten our families." The human ships pressed their attack with renewed fury. They had lost people, good people like Tony Rodriguez, but they were making the aliens pay for every human life. More importantly, they were teaching the galaxy a lesson that had been a long time coming. In the depths of space, other species watched the battle through long-range sensors and communication intercepts. For the first time in galactic history, someone was making the triumvirate bleed. The three most powerful militaries in known space were being hurt by a species that most had considered barely worthy of notice. The fight for Kepler 442b was just beginning, but already the galaxy was starting to understand that something had changed. The humans had refused to retreat, and now everyone would learn what that really meant. 6 months had passed since the battle at Kepler 442b, and the galaxy was discovering that the humans had been planning for this war much longer than anyone realized. What the aliens had thought were simple mining colonies turned out to be carefully disguised military bases. Research stations were actually weapons development facilities. Every human settlement beyond Earth had been preparing for the day when someone would try to force them back into their cage. Admiral Patricia Davis stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, humanity's first real warship built with captured alien technology. The ship was a deadly combination of human engineering and Zephyrian energy weapons, Corvaxi armor plating, and Nethrin biocomputing systems. Captain Rick Thompson commanded the vessel, while Lieutenant Karen White served as his tactical officer. "Target acquired," Karen reported as they approached the Zephyrian fortress world of Altair Prime. Their planetary shields are at full power and were reading over 200 defense platforms. Rick nodded grimly. Altair Prime was supposed to be impossible to attack. The Zephyrians had built it as their ultimate stronghold, a world that could withstand assault from entire fleets. Today, the humans were going to prove that impossible was just another word for something no one had tried hard enough to accomplish. "Take us in, but not where they expect," Rick ordered. The Defiance dove toward the planet's surface, skimming through the upper atmosphere while defense platforms fired uselessly at where they thought the ship would be. Meanwhile, on the other side of the galaxy, Commander Alex Butler was leading a different kind of assault. His team had infiltrated Altair Prime months earlier, disguised as maintenance workers and civilian contractors. While the Zephyrians focused on the obvious threat approaching from space, Alex and his people were already inside their most secure facilities. "Charges are set," Alex whispered into his communicator as he stood in the planet's central power distribution center. "Once we blow this, their whole defense grid will be running on backup power." The explosion shook the entire planet. In seconds, Altair Prime went from an impregnable fortress to a world struggling to keep its lights on. The defense platforms went offline one by one as their power sources failed. The planetary shields flickered and died. "Now!" Rick shouted from the bridge of the Defiance. The human warship opened fire with everything it had, targeting not the military installations, but the communication centers and command posts. Within minutes, the Zephyrian defenders could not talk to each other or coordinate their response. But the real shock came when the humans did something no invading force had ever done before. Instead of demanding unconditional surrender, they offered the Zephyrian population a choice. Commander Sarah Walsh's voice was broadcast across the planet on every available channel. "People of Altair Prime, this is Commander Walsh of the Human Defense Force. Your military has been neutralized, but we are not here to destroy you. We offer you 3 options. First, you can resist and face destruction. Second, You can surrender and be treated as prisoners according to galactic law. Third, you can join us as equals and help build a galaxy where no species is forced to bow to another. The response surprised everyone, including the humans. Instead of choosing death or surrender, thousands of Zephyrians chose the third option. They had lived under their own military aristocracy for centuries, and many were ready for change. The planet's industrial facilities, instead of being destroyed, were converted to produce ships and weapons for the human war effort. On the Korvaxi front, General Patricia Davis was learning that the warrior species had their own weaknesses. The Korvaxi respected strength above all else, but they had never faced an enemy that could match their dedication to total warfare. The planet New Sparta had become the testing ground for this clash of philosophies. The Korvaxi had deployed their feared planet killer weapon, a massive orbital cannon that could crack worlds in half. They expected the humans to evacuate or surrender rather than face total annihilation. Instead, the humans revealed that they had spent 3 years hollowing out New Sparta and turning it into the galaxy's largest weapons platform. When the planet killer fired, the planet fired back. The massive Korvaxi weapon was destroyed in a single salvo, and its wreckage became the foundation for humanity's first mobile battle station. General Davis stood on the planet's surface, watching Korvaxi ground forces attempt to establish landing zones. The alien warriors were brave and skilled, but they fought according to rigid tactical doctrines. Humans, on the other hand, fought like humans always had, with creativity and absolute refusal to accept defeat. "Sir, the enemy has taken Hill 347, reported Captain Danny Williams, who had been transferred from fleet duty to ground operations. "Then we take it back," Davis replied simply. "And when we do, we make sure they can never use it again." The assault on Hill 347 became legendary among human forces. Instead of trying to retake the position through conventional tactics, the humans tunneled underneath it and collapsed the entire hillside. The Korvaxi warriors found themselves buried under tons of rock and earth, victims of an enemy that refused to fight fair. But it was against the Nethran collective that humans achieved their strangest victory. Dr. Helen Mitchell had spent months studying the aliens' hive mind, trying to understand how billions of individuals could think and act as one. What she discovered changed everything. "Their strength is also their weakness," she explained to Admiral Davis during a strategy meeting. "They can't conceive of true individuality because they've never experienced it. If we can break their connection, even temporarily, they become completely helpless." Helen's plan was audacious even by human standards. Using captured Nethran bioships, her team would broadcast individualistic thoughts and emotions directly into the collective's communication network. The goal was not to destroy their ships or kill their people, but to give them something they had never had before: personal choice. The results exceeded every expectation. Entire Nethran fleets stopped fighting as their crews experienced individual thoughts for the first time in their species' history. Some ships surrendered immediately. Others simply drifted in space as their crews struggled to understand concepts like personal desire and individual opinion. But the most significant development was that many Nethran chose to stay disconnected from the collective permanently. They asked for asylum in human space, becoming the first refugees in a war where the enemy was being liberated rather than destroyed. Lieutenant Colonel Ben Harris, now commanding joint human and alien forces, reported the situation to Earth Command. "We're not just winning battles, sir. We're winning converts. Half the Nethran we capture end up asking to join us." By the end of the 6th month, the balance of power in the galaxy had shifted completely. The Triumvirate still had more ships and more planets, but they were fighting an enemy that grew stronger with every battle. More importantly, they were fighting a war against an idea: that every species had the right to determine its own destiny. Jake Morrison, still defending Kepler 442b, received regular reports from across human space. Each message brought news of another impossible victory, another enemy world that had chosen cooperation over conquest. The mining station that had started as humanity's most vulnerable colony was now the symbol of something much larger. They thought they could make us small, Jake told Lisa Brooks as they watched ships from a dozen different species working together in the asteroid field. They had no idea they were about to make us the biggest thing this galaxy has ever seen. 1 year after the ultimatum, the galaxy looked nothing like it had before. Admiral John Clark commanded the largest human fleet ever assembled from the bridge of the UES Liberation, a massive ship built from the combined technologies of all 3 former enemy species. The vessel was a symbol of what humanity had accomplished, not just military victory, but the complete transformation of galactic civilization. "Sir, incoming transmission from the Zephyrian High Council," reported Communications Officer Lisa Brooks, who had been promoted from her position at Kepler 442b. "They're requesting immediate negotiations." John smiled coldly. "Tell them the time for negotiation was 13 months ago. Now, we're dictating terms." The message was broadcast across the galaxy, reaching every world and every species. Humanity was no longer fighting for survival or even for victory. They were fighting to reshape the entire galactic order according to principles that most species had never even considered. Captain Nina Foster led the diplomatic corps that presented terms to the Zephyrian leadership. The elegant aliens who had once considered themselves the natural rulers of space now sat in a conference room aboard a human ship, listening to demands from a species they had tried to eliminate. "Your military forces will be placed under joint human oversight," Nina explained calmly. "Your weapons development programs will be shared with all species. Most importantly, every world in your territory will be given the choice to remain under your control or to join the new Galactic Confederation we're establishing." The lead Zephyrian diplomat, a tall female named Lyra Tell, struggled to maintain her composure. "You cannot seriously expect us to agree to these terms. We are offering you peace, not surrender." "You're offering us what we already have," Nina replied. Peace was never the issue. The issue was whether any species has the right to force another species back into a cage. We've decided that no one has that right, and we're prepared to enforce that decision. The negotiations with the Zephyrians were the easiest part of humanity's new diplomatic offensive. The real work was happening on hundreds of worlds, where species that had been oppressed for centuries were finally free to choose their own destiny. On the industrial front, Chief Engineer Pete Logan had revolutionized human manufacturing using technologies captured from all 3 enemy species. Human shipyards now produced vessels that surpassed anything the galaxy had seen before. The UES Retaliation, commanded by Captain Frank Moore, could single-handedly destroy entire enemy battle groups using weapons that the aliens themselves had developed but never dared to deploy. "The problem with the old galactic order," Pete explained to a gathering of engineers from dozens of species, was that everyone was afraid to push the boundaries. They had their little territories and their established technologies, and they were happy to stay safe and static. Humans don't do static. The proof of his words was visible in orbit around every major human world. Ships that combined the best features of all galactic civilizations were being produced at a rate that terrified the remaining enemy forces. But more importantly, these ships were crewed by mixed species teams, with former enemies working together as equals. Dr. Rebecca Stone had made the most dramatic breakthrough in her work with the Nethran Collective. Her research team had developed a way to safely and permanently separate individuals from the hive mind, giving them true personal freedom for the first time in their species' evolution. "The ethical implications are staggering," Rebecca reported to the Human Science Council. "We're literally creating a new form of consciousness. Former collective members are developing individual personalities, personal desires, even artistic expression. They're becoming who they were always meant to be." The transformation of the Nethran was the most visible sign of how the war had changed. What had started as a conflict between species had become something unprecedented. A war of liberation fought not just for territory or resources, but for the fundamental right of every individual to choose their own path. Commander Greg Turner coordinated with the growing number of allied species who had joined humanity's cause. These were not the major powers who had dominated the galaxy for millennia, but the hundreds of smaller civilizations who had been forced to exist in the shadows of the triumvirate. "They're not just helping us because we're winning," Greg reported to Admiral Clark. They're helping us because we're fighting for something they've wanted their whole lives, the right to be treated as equals instead of subjects. The minor species brought more than just ships and soldiers to the human cause. They brought knowledge, technology, and most importantly, legitimacy. When the galaxy saw that hundreds of different civilizations had chosen to stand with humanity, it became clear that this was not a human conquest, but a galactic revolution. The Corvaxi proved to be the most stubborn of the former triumvirate members. Their warrior culture made it difficult for them to accept defeat, but it also made them respect strength. When General Patricia Davis personally challenged their greatest champion to single combat and won, the entire Corvaxi military structure began to collapse. "Your species fights with honor," the defeated champion told Patricia as human medics treated his wounds. "We were wrong to think you weak because you value the lives of non-warriors. You are strong because you fight for others, not just for yourselves." The integration of Corvaxi forces into the human military was surprisingly smooth. Warriors who had spent centuries fighting for the glory of conquest found new purpose, fighting for the protection of the weak and the liberation of the oppressed. Their skills in battle combined with human tactical innovation created military units that were unmatched in the galaxy. But perhaps the most significant change was happening on worlds that had never been directly involved in the fighting. Species that had lived under triumvirate rule for generations were declaring independence and asking for protection under the growing human confederation. Entire star systems were voting to join the new galactic order that promised equality instead of domination. Jake Morrison, still commanding the defense of Kepler 442b, had watched his small mining colony become the unofficial capital of the new galactic government. Representatives from dozens of species came to the system that had first refused to retreat, seeking guidance on how to build a society based on cooperation instead of conquest. "It's ironic," he told his old friend Lisa Brooks during one of their regular conversations. "They tried to force us back to one star system, and instead they created something that spans half the galaxy. Every species that joins us makes us stronger, and every world that chooses freedom makes the old system weaker." The transformation was accelerating. What had taken the triumvirate millennia to build was being replaced in months by something entirely new. A civilization based not on the dominance of the strong over the weak, but on the principle that every species, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant, had the right to determine its own future. The war was not over, but its outcome was no longer in doubt. Humanity had not just refused to retreat. They had advanced so far and so fast that retreat was no longer possible for anyone. The galaxy was changing, and there was no going back to the way things had been. 2 years after humanity refused to retreat, Fleet Admiral Kevin Ross stood in the Great Assembly Hall on Luna Station, watching representatives from over 300 species sign the Terran Accords. The former mining station security chief had become humanity's highest-ranking military officer, but today he was witnessing something more important than any military victory: the birth of a new galactic civilization. The document being signed was not a surrender treaty or a list of demands from conquerors. Instead, it was a constitution that enshrined the right of every species to defend their territory and way of life. The hall buzzed with dozens of different languages as beings who had been enemies just months before worked together to create laws that would govern their shared future. Dr. Julia Adams presented her report on the war's aftermath to the assembled delegates. Her statistics told a story that surprised even the humans who had fought the war. Civilian casualties across the galaxy were remarkably low, not because the fighting had been gentle, but because human forces had consistently offered evacuation and protection to non-combatants even among enemy populations. The old galactic order was maintained through fear, Julia explained to the assembly. Entire species remained quiet and compliant because they were afraid of what would happen if they spoke up. The human approach was different. Instead of ruling through fear, we offered something that had been missing from galactic politics for millennia: hope. The transformation had not been limited to military and political changes. Captain Danny Williams, now commanding the Joint Species Patrol Fleet, toured systems that had been battlefields just months earlier. Where once there had been strict territorial boundaries between species. There were now mixed colonies and trading stations. The galaxy had been static for thousands of years under the Triumvirate, but now it was expanding and changing at a rate that amazed everyone. The old rulers never wanted change, Danny reported to Admiral Ross. Change meant risk, and risk meant they might lose their positions, but humans thrive on change. We see it as opportunity, not danger. The evidence was everywhere. Former Zephyrian worlds were experimenting with democratic governments for the first time in their history. Ex-Corvaxi warriors were learning to use their skills to protect instead of conquer. Nethran individuals were creating art and music that expressed personal feelings rather than collective thoughts. The galaxy was discovering creativity and innovation that had been suppressed for generations. President Maria Gonzalez arrived from Earth to dedicate the memorial to human determination, a structure built from wreckage of the first alien ships destroyed at Kepler, 442b. Representatives from across the galaxy gathered for the ceremony, but the memorial was not about human superiority or military might. Instead, it honored a simple principle that had changed everything. When pushed, humanity doesn't push back, President Gonzalez said in her dedication speech. We push forward. We don't fight to return to where we were. We fight to get to where we need to be. This memorial stands not as a monument to human victory, but as a reminder that some lines cannot be crossed, some peoples cannot be contained, and some wars create the very thing they were meant to prevent. The ceremony was attended by former enemies who had become allies. Admiral Veltar of the Zephyrians had traded his military uniform for the robes of a civilian diplomat. Commander Thak of the Corvaxi now led integrated human-alien security forces that protected trade routes throughout the galaxy. Even the Nethran had sent representatives, individuals who had chosen personal freedom over collective consciousness and were building new lives as unique persons. The most moving moment came when Captain Tony Rodriguez's widow spoke about her husband's sacrifice. The man who had rammed his mining ship into a Corvaxi destroyer had become a symbol not of human aggression, but of human willingness to sacrifice for principle. Tony didn't die because he hated aliens, she said simply. He died because he loved. The idea that his children should be free to live wherever they chose and become whatever they wanted to be, that idea was worth dying for, and it turned out to be worth living for too. The memorial service was broadcast across the galaxy, reaching billions of beings who had never seen humans before the war began. The message was clear. This species, that had been dismissed as insignificant newcomers, had not just won a military conflict. They had won the right to reshape galactic civilization according to their own values. Jake Morrison, now an old man with gray hair and deep lines around his eyes, attended the ceremony with his granddaughter Amy. She was part of the first generation to grow up in the new galactic order, a child who would never know what it meant to be told that her species had no right to expand beyond their home system. Grandpa, Amy asked as they watched ships from dozens of species launch from Earth's orbital stations, what was the war really about? Jake thought carefully before answering. His granddaughter had grown up in a galaxy where humans and aliens worked together as equals, where the idea of species-based discrimination seemed as outdated as slavery or monarchy. For her, the current state of galactic civilization was normal. She could not imagine how different things had been just 2 years earlier. They thought they could make us smaller by forcing us to retreat, Jake said slowly. They didn't understand that humans don't get smaller when threatened. We get bigger. We don't just fight for our lives, we fight for our right to grow, to explore, to become more than we were. And once that fight began, there was never any question how it would end. Amy nodded seriously, trying to understand concepts that were already becoming historical curiosities. But why did they want to make you retreat in the first place? Because they were afraid, Jake replied. They had built a galaxy where everything stayed the same, where everyone knew their place and nobody challenged the established order. Then humans showed up and started changing things just by being ourselves. We explored where we weren't supposed to explore, built homes where we weren't supposed to build, and asked questions that no one was supposed to ask. He pointed to the memorial, where the twisted metal of destroyed alien warships had been shaped into a sculpture that reached toward the stars. The galaxy needed to learn that some lines can't be crossed, some peoples can't be contained, and some wars create the very thing they were meant to prevent. They tried to put us in a cage, and instead they freed everyone. As the sun set on Earth, ships from hundreds of different species launched into space, carrying the human message to new frontiers that were opening every day. The galaxy had learned its lesson: never retreat, always advance, and remember that the universe is big enough for everyone who's willing to stand up for their place in it. The war that began when humanity refused to retreat had ended with the entire galaxy moving forward together toward a future that none of them could have imagined, before they learned what humans really meant when they said they would never give up.